did I get involved in working with deaf people? It's a circuitous route. There are no deaf people in my family, but after I finished graduate school, I went to work at a private school, and there were several students that I became very much involved with, and there were two boys that I actually raised. One of the boys was a boy who had, uh, well, he was deaf-blind or hard of hearing and blind. I think that's really the proper expression. Uh, I met this boy when he was 11 or 12. He came into my room because he had a little problem with his eye. He came into my room and he popped his glass eye out and he said, I got an itch back here. Can you see anything? And of course, to me, this was something I didn't want to do. But to him, this was just something, and he couldn't do this for himself to see what kind of itch he had back there. So that's how I first met Danny. Uh, his mother died, and I then took on responsibility for raising him. Danny was an incubator baby in 1951 or 52. This is going back a ways. And I guess you can tell by my gray hair that I'm a little older than maybe the average person here at the Institute. Anyway, Danny was an incubator baby, and at that time there was problems in knowing how much oxygen to have in the incubator. And Danny had too much oxygen, and he developed a problem called retrolental fibroplasia. I decided this morning I'd look it up on the web to make sure I could spell it properly, and the first thing I see is it's an old name for retinal pathology of prematurity, which I assume is retinal problems of premature babies. In any event, Danny was born with one eye that had to be removed almost immediately, and in the other eye, he had 15% peripheral vision. That's all, no direct vision. And he's a kid I've admired throughout my life because with that little bit of vision, he's been able to do so much. He also had, because of his prematurity, he lost a lot of his hearing, or he grew up with very little hearing. He uses hearing aids, and he manages fairly well in the hearing world. He has learned sign language. He worked for a while in Rochester at the 242 house, which always amazed me because here's a guy using sign language with deaf people, and he only had 15% peripheral vision, no direct vision. But I want to go back and tell some other stories about Danny because he's such an interesting guy. He was at a school with pretty much normal people physically, and he wanted to do what everybody else did. When other children decided they wanted to learn archery, Danny was going to do it too. He would get up there and he trained his eye so that he could concentrate on that little bit of peripheral vision that he had. And he'd be looking, you'd think he'd be looking like this, but he would try to shoot those arrows. Now, I always stayed away, but he always tried. At one point, other kids had mopeds. He decided he was going to ride a moped too. Now, he couldn't see the road. The only thing Danny could see was a little shadow on the side of the road, and he would ride his moped. I admired him for trying. I often said, Danny, you can't do this, but that never worked, and that's fine. After we left the school and we came to Rochester, Danny decided he wanted to be a bicycle repairman. And he went to one of the bicycle shops here in Rochester and worked as an apprentice. And he could do a lot of things with his hands. He was very, very, very good with his hands. But when it came to lining up that the things on the bike, he just couldn't do it. It wasn't something he could really do. But he liked to ride a bike. And once in a while I would go riding with him. Well, one day he decided we were going to go riding down South Clinton Avenue. And he was in the bike in front of me, and I was positive he was going to be dead. He survived. Another story about Danny is Danny decided that, well, he had this eye problem, he had this hearing problem because, well, he's here in America and we don't do it right for some reason. So he's reading up on various different diets. Uh, he got into a rice diet, and for a while he only ate brown rice. This isn't brown rice with chicken, brown rice with vegetables. This was brown rice. It was a macrobiotic diet. It didn't work. Then he decided he was going to become a fruitarian, only ate fruit. Then he read about Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory was into dieting. No, I'm sorry, not into dieting, he was into fasting. And Danny decided he was going to fast. He was just going to wash out every bit of problem he had in his body. At this point, he wasn't living with me anymore. He decided to fast, and that meant he didn't eat. He didn't eat for 5 days, didn't eat for 10 days, for 15 days. And I would go over and I'd see Danny and encourage him, and he'd say, well, I need to fast a little bit more. After 35, 36 days, he was really skinny. This was the point in which I thought, I'm going to jail. This guy's going to die. It's my fault. Well, for some reason, Danny decided it was time to call Dick Gregory. Danny calls up Dick Gregory, and Dick Gregory answers the phone. Dick Gregory says, essentially, this is crazy. Here's the name of a doctor in Chicago who knows about fasting. Call this woman up. And Danny does. And he's told, well, we have to start out with something very, very mild. A little bit of apple juice. And every day, Danny would follow this regimen, apple juice, and very orange juice without pulp, and then orange juice with pulp. And he got to the point where he could manage to get around. And he lived. I could never get Danny to go to college. He was a very independent guy. He liked making bread. We had made bread together at this school. We used to make bread for 40 people in a bowl like this. We used to do it all by hand. And so he is a bread baker in California now and doing pretty well. Not the kind of life I want to live, but he's doing okay.